Here are 5 different ways to shuffle a deck of cards so you can look like a card sharp at your next game of Snap or poker, whichever you want. Shuffle number 1 is called the Overhand Shuffle. It's popular in the UK and across many European countries. This is what it looks like. If we slow it down, each hand is doing something very different. So the right hand is pulling the cards from the bottom and throwing them in small piles onto the top. And the second hand is receiving the cards and just keeping them square in the left hand. We're going to break it down a little bit further. So the left hand, the first part, is the little finger, ring finger and middle finger are just lightly curled underneath the deck like this. So they're not really doing much, they're just kind of supporting the bottom of the deck so they don't fall out of our hand. So they're literally just loosely curled around the back here. The index finger falls across the front, just diagonally ever so slightly, if you can see this from this angle here. So falling across the front here, and the thumb is doing this action as the index finger does this. It's almost a squeezing action between these two fingers. As their cards are being received, they're just kind of being pinched. So when the cards fall really far out front, they're just being pinched and kept square in the hand. That's the best way I can describe that. The thumb is doing this just to receive the cards as they're being thrown in, to keep them under control. Throughout all of these shuffles, it's all about control and maintaining control of the cards with the fingers in their hands. So the left hand is doing this squeezing action with the thumb and the index finger, and these 3 fingers under here aren't doing much at all. They're literally just staying there and they're just helping support the cards from underneath. The right hand, on the other hand, I make my own jokes, is picking up over half the deck, and the left hand just allows those cards just to fall back down onto those fingers there. So that once more, as we take the cards away, it just falls down. Nothing much really happens. As we're throwing the cards like this, you'll notice that my middle fingers of my right hand and my thumb are doing this kind of an action. So this is happening like this, and it's basically releasing the cards small packets at a time. So slowly opening up just so enough cards can fall, and my index finger on top is resting, and it's kind of not pushing down, but it's putting a fair amount of just a little bit of encouragement just to get those cards to go across. So there's this opening closing of the thumb and the middle fingers, and the index finger is kind of doing this. So altogether we're kind of doing this action, and then with the cards in play we're picking up and throwing like this, and take into account what the index finger, middle finger and thumb is doing. So once more, just throwing like this, and that is called the Overhand Shuffle. Shuffle number 2 is called the Hindu Shuffle. This is a very popular shuffle in Asia. A slightly different grip. We're gripping from the long edges here, and you'll see that there's a sort of a trio of kind of grip here. We've got the thumb, the index finger and the middle finger is holding the deck, and the left hand kind of strips small packets away from the right hand. So it's a little bit different to the Overhand Shuffle. The Overhand Shuffle, we're giving the left hand the cards. In the Hindu Shuffle, sorry, the left hand is taking the cards away from the right. And there can be a little bit of a motion as we're sort of helping the cards fall over, so you might get this kind of two-handed motion like this. But if we break down the shuffle, middle finger and thumb and index finger are gripping the deck like this. So there's a bit of a grip here, and the sort of ring finger and little finger just are kind of cushioning up against the middle finger. They're not actually in contact with the cards, they're just encouraging they're taking the load off, or supporting the middle finger in this grip. And the index finger has a little bit of kind of a weight pushing down, similar to the Overhand Shuffle. It's not really a huge amount of pressure, but just enough to help steady the cards and again keep them under control. And the left hand is stripping away small packets of cards like this. Now, my index finger, middle finger and thumb are kind of holding the cards in place to keep them locked in. If I was to loosen this grip on my right hand and do the shuffle, it'd become a little bit more sloppy and not quite as controlled, and we don't want that. So what we want is a nice controlled and neat shuffle. so cards aren't going everywhere. The left hand, there's two things going on. The first one is the middle fingers and thumb are taking off the small packet, like this, and the index finger is stopping the cards from falling any further. So it's they're kind of being shook into place. So they grab a small packet and then boom, it's kind of giving it to the index finger, like this, boom. Okay, if my index finger wasn't there and we tried to do this, the cards would just end up tipping out all over the table, right? So the index finger's job is really important. It stops the cards from slipping out. So that once again, just like this, and the index finger is just keeping everything nice and square, like that. And that is the Hindu shuffle. Shuffle number 3 is called the Riffle shuffle. This is probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing shuffles because it makes some noise and there's a lot going on and it looks kind of difficult to do. There's a little bit of practice involved, as with all of these shuffles, but once you get the knack, you've got it. And people seem to be impressed by this. Just by shuffling the cards in this manner, it seems to impress people and people tend to think you're quite good at cards. And all you're doing is just shuffling. This is the shuffle in action, full speed, like this. And once more, like this. So that's the Riffle shuffle. We're going to break it down. There's a few things that are going on here. So the first thing is we're breaking the deck into two separate, or two equal blocks, and we're pivoting them up into the left hand like this. That move once again, it's going up like this into the left hand. So the way this is working is the grip is between my middle fingers, little finger, and my thumb at the top. They're holding the cards with a downwards pressure and upwards pressure, and then my index finger behind here is curled ever so slightly behind, and it's pushing from behind. So you can see that warping a little bit, and my thumb is pulling and my index finger is pushing, which creates this kind of a bow, which allows the cards to fall off the thumb. Now the thumb, rather than the thumb pulling backwards this direction, pulling back this way, it's actually doing this motion, so it's sweeping across the edges of the cards like this. So it's not pulling back, it's pushing, sort of easing off the side as it pulls closer to itself. That's an important little tip there. You'll have a bit more control when your thumb goes sideways. You'll see my thumb is sideways right now. It's not in this position, which is a lot harder to get any control. So if I hold my thumb like this, it's harder to control that. If it's off to the side, I can control individual playing cards dropping off the thumb with relative ease. That's a nice little tip there. So the grip is here and here. The first part is we're going to let some cards fall about half, and then the middle fingers of the right hand are going to lift them up onto the left hand middle fingers, and then the thumb receives them like this. Okay. If you've got a table, you can tap them against the table and square them up like this with your index fingers on top. This keeps them nice and square and in a controlled position. Essentially, we know where they are every single time. We can square them like this, or if we don't have a table, we can use our leg, or we can just tap the cards with our index fingers and little fingers just to kind of square things up if we're going to do the shuffle in the air like this. Okay, so that once again comes off as the fingers up to the thumb. The next part is to weave the cards into each other like this. Now the way this works, there's a change of hand position. So the cards come up, and the cards are going to kind of be pivoted. If you watch my middle fingers here, they're kind of pivoted in until they hit the base of the thumb, just here and here. So they go from this position, and then my middle fingers are going to pivot the cards in until it hits the base of the thumb, and my index finger helps encourage, just straightens and pushes down, and it encourages that position. Okay, so we get into this position, and the index finger is again applying pressure. This can be curled behind the back like this to apply the pressure, or you can keep it outstretched like this to apply the pressure. And again, our thumbs are sideways on, they're not forwards like this, they're sideways onto the packets to give us more control, remember. And we let cards individually fall like this, and that is what weaves them together, and that is the Riffle shuffle, like that. So that once again, up and in, pull against, index fingers push, and the thumb pulls to create a bend like this, which holds the pressure. As we release the pressure like a coiled spring, all the cards fall and we can push them together, just like that. So that's the Riffle shuffle. The Riffle shuffle also has a waterfall or a bridge finish, which a lot of people are keen to learn, and it's one of the fancier things you can do with this shuffle, and it looks like this. That shuffle once again, Riffle shuffle with waterfall finish. The way this happens is it's a transfer of pressure. So first of all, we're pushing pressure going down and up with the thumbs. As we change our grip, we're taking the pressure the other direction. So our thumbs are kind of going underneath. I'll show you what I mean. Again, cards go up, we pull in, riffle. Now notice how the cards are in this kind of an arc at the moment, okay? Because we've just done this shuffle like this. They're kind of in that, this is an exaggerated arc. We're now going to transfer that arc to go the other way like a bridge, which is why it's called the bridge, like that, okay? So that's the first part. So shuffle, and as I do this, I push over a card or two here, and the reason for that is if we don't do that, then the cards, the lattice we've just made with the two cards interweaving in each other, if we push the pressure the opposite direction, this happens and they can unweave themselves. So pushing over this top card just helps prevent that from happening as we go back into the arch like this. Okay, and there's quite a strong grip here, and I'm going to go for this once more because it's quite an in-depth thing. So we're going to shuffle like this, they weave, we push over, both thumbs brace on top, and then our middle fingers are gripping, and they're holding quite tight underneath, so they're gripping quite tight. And my wrists, it's my wrists that do this motion. My wrists just open like that, so it's not my hands doing this so much, it's my wrists which are just moving outwards to get this arc to go into position. Then all I need to do is just straighten my fingers underneath, 1, 2, and that will allow the cards to fall in that waterfall fashion. So once again, cards go up, square, pull in tight, index fingers pushing down, thumbs sideways, riffle, push over a small amount of cards, brace, wrists out, and let go. The way to get that evenly done is basically to keep on practicing the cards falling off the thumbs in a controlled manner. So the better you get this distribution, the more even this distribution here, the better that waterfall finish will sound. Okay, so that is the Riffle shuffle with the waterfall or bridge finish. Shuffle number 4 is called the Faro shuffle, or the perfect Faro shuffle. It gets its name from an old-fashioned card game called Faro. By using this shuffle, you'd get an edge or an advantage to winning that game of Faro, and I'll show you how it works. So this is it in full speed. There we go. You'll see every other card has been interwoven with each other. You can do a nice pretty bridge with it as well. So the way this works is, this is incredibly knacky shuffle to get down. The first thing is to use a deck of cards which isn't too worn. If you've got lots of dinks in the cards, or little kind of nooks, or sort of an old deck of cards, this shuffle will be very difficult to achieve. So a relatively new deck of cards is the better choice to go down. The first thing to do is to cut the deck almost exactly in half. So I've been doing Magic for the majority of my life, so I know that there are 26 cards in each of these piles. It's just something you get to do when you hang around with cards too long and you don't really have many. Here we go, so you cut the deck into 2 halves, and this is all about controlling the state of the cards before the shuffle begins. So The way I'm gripping these is to keep the cards as square as possible along the edges. So I'm using my thumbs, my little fingers, and down here is keeping them square. There's pressure coming from here and here, and I'm using my index finger as well, just to keep these nice and square. And I'm tapping them against each other like this, just to make sure they're as square as can be. The next part is I'm using my index finger to push down ever so slightly on the card, so you can see a slight bend here, which just applies a bit of pressure. This pushes all of the air out of the cards. So there might be air trapped in here. I don't know if you can see, but you can see there's sort of air in there. If I push my index finger down, it locks all the cards down and prevents air pockets from happening. And the air pockets are our worst enemy in this shuffle. So we want them to be as square and as pushed down as possible. So my index finger pushes down. Now half of, or sort of the tip of my finger is hanging off the edge just here. And this is so I can push against the other deck of cards and push downwards to push the air out of here. You might be able to see on this camera there are slight little imperfections in the playing cards, and you can see where the warps are creating little air pockets. We don't want that. So the first thing is to push downwards. We then align this, and now the first part is to align the top card, and I'm rotating this hand inwards like this. Okay, so this hand is pushing these cards into here. There's not a lot of pressure. Once you kind of find that sweet spot, they will just, I found it there, you see? It'll just happen naturally, and they just melt into each other. As long as the cards aren't too warped, it just happens, okay? So that once again, everything's locked in position, and my little finger back here is really holding steady. It's got a firm, kind of sort of stable foundation here. Because if this isn't strong enough, then the cards can push down and they can get warped like this. And we don't want that. We want a really strong edge. So when we push against this, these cards aren't going anywhere. They're going to stay in one block like this. And equally, my index finger is doing the same job for these. Anything that gets pushed upwards, so this doesn't happen, okay? So, tap the cards, get them nice and flat. These get pushed down, pushing any air out. The second block comes up on its kind of edge, just here. And that top card, we're just kind of lining up with the index finger, we're finding that sweet spot, and I'm twisting the deck, and it just happens naturally, just the way the decks work with each other, and you'll get this perfect separation of every other card being shuffled within itself. And you'll know you've got it right when you've got one card facing one way and one card facing the opposite, because you have 26 cards in each, so they won't ever be matching. That is the perfect Faro shuffle. And finally, shuffle number 5. This is called the wash. You might see this in professional card games when there's a croupier dealing. They'll wash the cards like this across the table. This achieves one thing, which is the cards aren't being shown. The faces of the cards, or risk of the cards flipping over, is minimalised by doing this kind of a shuffle. So anybody that's seen gameplay, or even the croupier themselves, won't be able to see where certain cards are. Some of the other shuffles, it's possible to get a glimpse of where cards might be in the deck, which give unfair advantage in the game, which we don't want in a fair game of cards. There is a bit of an act to this. I did a bit of research. As you're washing them, you're taking cards which are sitting on the top, like these ones, and you're purposefully pushing them under the ones which are on the bottom. So there's a bit of a method to the madness. But once you've washed them enough on the table, you can gather them up. If you're playing a professional game of cards, then don't pick them up too high. Otherwise, some of the players might see the cards. But if you're not playing professional cards, you can square them like this. And you can even give them a cut, like that. So there you have it. That's 5 different ways to shuffle a deck of playing cards. Hopefully now you're well on your way to becoming a card shuffling pro and looking super cool at the next game of Snap that you've been planning with your friends that you have. If you'd like me to deep dive into any of the shuffles you saw, let me know in the comments below. And if you suffer from shaky or sweaty hands while you're doing these shuffles, you should definitely check out this video here, where I give you a few tips on how to deal with that. Until next time, in a bit.